Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Incubator Podcast live at PAS 2026. We're joined in the booth by Dr. David Sass. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Great to have you. It's always a pleasure to have our subspecialty colleagues on the Incubator Podcast. You are a pediatric nephrologist, and you are coming to PAS this year, and you're presenting on a very interesting topic. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, yeah. So my presentation is basically looking at the long-term safety and efficacy of a drug called Lumasiran for the treatment of primary hyperoxaluria type 1, so which is a very rare but severe genetic kidney stone disease that historically leads to end-stage failure in a significant proportion of patients. So this medication is a game changer, and it was FDA approved in 2020, and this is the long-term extension of that initial trial that achieved FDA approval. So we've got a few years of experience under our belt that we're reporting on.
And can you tell us a little bit about the disease itself?
Yeah,
How common is it, and what does it present like?
yeah. So it
Sorry, I was going to say that, from board studying recently, the only thing I can remember is oxalate crystals. That's the only thing I can remember. So we would love to hear more about the
yes.
actual disorder.
Yeah, no, and those are two relevant words in the disease process, oxalate crystals. So it's a genetic disease. It's actually, even though it affects the kidneys and causes kidney failure and kidney stones, it's actually a hepatic disease. So there's pathogenic variants in the AGXT gene lead to overabundant oxalate production by the liver. And this overabundant oxalate ends up in the bloodstream, and then the only way out of the body is through the kidneys. Well, on its way out, it creates lots of oxalate crystals and what we call crystal nephropathy. And so it causes discrete stones, which can be painful, nephrocalcinosis, and in roughly 60% of patients results in end-stage kidney disease. And one of the sort of trickier things about it too is if you get kidney failure, yes, you need a kidney transplant, just like everyone with kidney failure, but you also need a liver transplant. So kids often will historically have needed liver and kidney transplants, which are, it's a pretty complicated, big ordeal. So, yeah, that's the overall description of the disease process.
When do they typically present? And it sounds like it could be a NICU presentation too, but like when does the hepatic dysfunction and all that present as well?
For sure. And just to clarify, like the liver itself, like in terms of like LFTs and the normal things livers have to do, that's all fine. It's just this overabundant oxalate.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the liver transplant teams get a little confused when we present for liver transplant, because they're like, what are you talking about? This liver's fine. You're like, yeah, except for this one thing, this one enzyme that's causing problems. So anyway, the presentation could be anywhere from like literally prenatally, if there's nephrocalcinosis seen on prenatal ultrasound, or into adulthood. Mostly it's identified in like mid-childhood. That's probably the most common, but it can be any time. And it usually presents classically with kidney stones. So the classic presentation is a kid gets kidney stones. Someone says, that's weird. Kids don't usually get kidney stones. They send them to a pediatric nephrologist with expertise in stones. We check urine biochemistry, and that's the clue. We see very high urine oxalate, like through the roof urine oxalate, and we say, okay, gosh, this could be one of the three primary hyperoxalurias, and we go down our diagnostic algorithm from there. So once you make that diagnosis, PH1 historically has been a devastating diagnosis to give families because there was no treatment. We tell patients, drink a lot of water. Like we'll come up with specific amounts of water they need to drink. They need to avoid foods high in sodium, and they probably take a crystal inhibitor like potassium citrate. But like none of these are actual legit treatments. These are not, so it's historically been a devastating diagnosis and really tough for families to deal with.
Yeah, and I was going to. And what about liver transplant? You've mentioned obviously is that something that in the past was used to address the disease?
Yeah, because
And
it is
successfully?
curative. It's curative. So you remove the offending liver and put in a healthy functioning liver, or one that's not creating massive amounts of oxalate, and the disease is cured. But living the rest of your lifetime on immunosuppression and complications are related to that is no easy task. So patients were desperate for treatment for this for years, and then Lumasiran came along. So Lumasiran uses siRNA technology to suppress one of the enzymes in the oxalate pathway. So it messes that up so that the substrate for oxalate production is minimized, and therefore the downstream oxalate levels are also reduced quite a bit. And specifically, so the drug it's an injected drug, and it's initially given monthly and as a loading sort of schedule, and then maintenance dosing is quarterly, so quarterly injections. And the data that we're presenting shows that you give the medication, and urinary oxalate drops precipitously within the first 3 months. And then we're presenting that this 60-month extension long-term data is that it stays down. So it goes down quickly and it stays down. So you have effective reduction in oxalate and sustained reduction
Quarterly for how long?
forever, lifelong. Yeah. So it's still nothing, right? That's still a big deal. It's an expensive drug, but
but it's a huge
Yeah.
upside compared to either liver transplant or unfortunately
Kidney or-
mortality.
yeah. No, it's a huge breakthrough. Like my patients were so grateful. So earlier you asked about the abundance of the condition. Like, it's hard to say for sure what the
Prevalence?
prevalence of the gene variants in the population. It's hard to say for sure, but I can tell you this: at Mayo Clinic, where we have pretty much the largest registry for patients with PH, we have about 600 total patients with primary hyperoxaluria. So it falls under the category of ultra rare disease, but also severe and worth addressing.
Yeah.
Of the ones who get diagnosed.
Right. And so here's one of the tricky things about primary hyperoxaluria is they form calcium oxalate stones, which happen to be the most common stone type out there, right? There are probably, a few hundred stone formers in this building right now, and 90%, 80 to 90% of them form calcium oxalate stones. So it takes an educated urologist or nephrologist to go, maybe we should work this up. This could be primary hyperoxaluria. If for these patients who have, I talk to parents and they're like, oh yeah, I've passed 20 stones. I'm like, has everyone done a 24-hour urine on you? No one's ever mentioned that. Gosh, so for sure we are missing patients out there. It's a big problem. In fact, I'm going to look into the camera and say, urologists and nephrologists out there, if you have patients who are having recurrent stone disease, please check a 24-hour urine. And if the oxalate is high, consider primary hyperoxaluria or send the patient to someone who is wise in the ways of rare stone disease. Thank you.
And after this public service announcement, I think this is a great way for us to wrap up. David, thank you so much for dropping by the booth and sharing your work with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And there's a lot of exciting, things going on in the field too. We have, we're actually working on it. We're doing a clinical trial at Mayo Clinic right now that utilizes gene editing to cure the disease once and with 1 or 2 doses. It's the clinical trials in its early stages. So we still have a long way to go, but that's super exciting. I mean, it's exciting that we have, these treatments out there, but it'll be even more exciting if we can come up with a
How
cure.
fast is the field moving that you barely get to
Crazy, right?
to revel in the pleasure of this new medication that works. You put it 3-4 times a year and this works, and you were still ready to cure.
Well, especially when, the siRNA technology, like the first papers from a basic science standpoint came out in 2001,
Wow.
out of this, obscure lab in Germany. And that the author said, maybe someday this could be used as a therapy, a method for treatment of disease. And that was the first siRNA, concept. And then 20 years later, we have an FDA approved drug using that exact technology.
Which from bench to bedside is quite a fast.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even that's more accelerated now.
Yeah.
I mean, the gene editing and everything, which is wonderful. I mean, gosh, it gives me a lot of hope. I think we're kind of in the golden age of medicine now.
Awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you, David.
My
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much.
Yep. Take care.